Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories. I wasn't even supposed to be on that date, honestly. I've been dodging dating apps for a while after a string of weird matches and even weirder conversations, but Ellie was different. Her messages didn't feel like she was just swiping out of boredom. She was funny, quick, and a little odd in a way that felt interesting. Not like crazy odd, more like you wouldn't know what she'd say next. I liked that. So when she suggested dinner, I said yes. We met outside this old Italian place downtown. Not fancy, not a hole in the wall either. One of those restaurants that's been around for decades and never changed the wallpaper. It smelled like garlic and red wine the second we stepped in, which felt comforting in a weird way. Ellie showed up in this oversized red coat, a little stain on the cuff, but she pulled it off. Her hair was kind of messy, like she didn't care much, and she smiled at me like she'd already decided the night was going to be good. The first half hour was solid. We talked about music, movies, random stuff. She had this way of asking questions that made you want to talk more. But there was this moment, really quick, when I was talking about my older brother, and she just stared. Like, didn't blink. Not like she was bored. Just still. I thought maybe I said something weird, but then she laughed and the moment passed. I told myself not to overthink it. The food came out, and everything seemed normal. Until it wasn't. About halfway through the meal, this woman behind us stood up a little too fast. She had a tall glass of sangria in her hand, and she must have lost her balance or something, because the drink slipped. Not all of it, but enough to splash across the back of Ellie's coat and some on her shoulder. She froze. At first, I thought she was going to laugh it off. I mean, yeah, it sucked, but it was clearly an accident. The woman immediately started apologizing, reaching for napkins, saying she'd pay for dry cleaning or whatever. Classic panic mode. But Ellie didn't move. Her expression didn't change. She just slowly turned her head to look at the woman like she was analyzing her. Not like she was mad, but like she was trying to decide something. Then Ellie stood up. Not fast. Not dramatic. She just stood, walked around the table, and charged straight into this woman. Not like a full-on tackle, but more like she shoved her hard, right in the chest. The woman stumbled back into her table and knocked over 2 chairs. A glass shattered. People gasped. Someone yelled. It all happened in under 5 seconds. I was frozen. Everyone around us was frozen. And Ellie just stood there, breathing through her nose like a bull, staring down at this woman on the floor. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't saying anything. She just stood there, jaw tight, like she wasn't done yet. I finally snapped out of it and rushed over to pull her back. I kept saying it was fine, that it was just a drink, that it wasn't a big deal. I tried to laugh it off, which felt ridiculous with everyone staring. But I didn't know what else to do. Ellie didn't fight me. She let me take her arm and guide her back to the table, but her eyes never left the woman. Even as she sat down, she was watching her like she expected her to get up and try something. The woman was crying. Some guy, maybe a boyfriend, was helping her up, saying something about calling the police. Ellie didn't react. She just picked up her fork and went back to eating like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just shoved a stranger to the ground in the middle of a family restaurant. I paid the check without finishing my food. The waiter didn't even look me in the eye when he dropped it off. I told Ellie we should probably go before things got worse. She nodded, wiped her mouth, and stood up like we were leaving a movie that got boring halfway through. Outside, I asked her what the hell that was all about. She just said the woman did it on purpose. I asked why someone would spill a drink on her coat on purpose, and she just smiled and said, "Some people are stupid like that." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just, That. I walked her to her car mostly because I didn't know what else to do. On the way, she asked if I wanted to come back to her place and listen to a record she'd been talking about during dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just assaulted someone in public. I told her I had an early morning and that I'd text her later. She said, "Okay," and got in her car. No hug. No awkward goodbye. Just, "Okay." I didn't text her later, or ever. But she texted me, that same night. Just one sentence. Did you see how she looked at me before she did it? I didn't respond. She texted again the next morning. Don't ignore me. That was real. I blocked her number. The weird thing is, I don't think she was drunk, or high, or even mentally unstable in a way that you could explain. She was just off. Off in a way that didn't look like anything was wrong on the outside, but underneath there was something else. Something dark. Like she was walking around wearing someone else's skin and had to keep reminding herself how to act. I still think about that woman she shoved. I wonder if she's alright, if she ever pressed charges, if maybe she's still freaked out by it. I know I am. I've never seen someone change so fast. It wasn't a loss of temper. It was a choice. Ellie looked at her, decided she was a threat, and handled it the way someone handles a threat in a nightmare. And the worst part, there was a second, right after it happened, when she looked at me, just briefly. And there was this flicker of something in her eyes. Not shame, not fear. It looked like pride. I met Dean on a Tuesday, which already felt a bit weird. I usually don't do first dates during the week. I like having an excuse to leave early if it goes badly, and I hate showing up to work the next day feeling drained. But Dean had this quiet confidence in his messages, and he didn't come off too strong like a lot of guys do. He asked simple questions, actually responded to my answers like he read them, and had this sense of timing that didn't feel forced. So I said yes. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Not one of those chain places, but one of those semi-artsy ones where the menu's all chalk and the walls are covered in plants. He was already there when I showed up, sitting near the back by the windows. He looked exactly like his pictures, which already put him ahead of 80% of the people I'd met through apps. He stood up when he saw me, smiled in this calm, almost polite way, and offered to grab me something. It felt normal. The date itself, not bad. I mean, it wasn't incredible either, but it was fine. We talked about movies, jobs, places we wanted to travel. He had this really even tone when he spoke, like everything he said had already been carefully thought through. But not in a boring way, just measured. I did notice he never really laughed. He smiled, nodded a lot, but didn't show much emotion. Still, I didn't think too much of it. I just figured he was shy or maybe kind of introverted. After about an hour, we said goodbye. He didn't push for a second location or act weird when I didn't invite him back to mine. He just told me he had a good time and hoped we'd talk again. I said sure, and we went our separate ways. I even texted my friend that it had gone surprisingly okay. It was a 15-minute walk back to my place. I stopped at a 24-hour corner store to grab some snacks for the next day, just feeling kind of chill about the whole thing. No red flags, no awkward moments. It wasn't electric or anything, but I figured I'd probably see him again. Then I turned the corner onto my street. There was a car idling near the entrance to my building. Headlights off, just parked there with the engine going. I remember thinking it was weird, but it's the city. Weird stuff happens all the time. As I got closer, I saw a man standing outside, leaning against the railing. Mid-40s maybe, plain clothes, but with that stance that just screamed cop. And yeah, that's exactly what he was. He waited until I was almost at the door before stepping forward and asking if I was who he thought I was. He said my full name. I nodded, confused and a little annoyed, and asked what was going on. That's when he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printed photo, black and white, grainy, like a still from a security camera. But it was him. Dean. Same face, same jacket he'd worn earlier that night. I just kind of stared at it for a second. My brain didn't know how to process it. It didn't even look like a mugshot or anything. Just a weirdly normal photo. The detective didn't say much at first. He told me they'd been trying to track this guy for a while. That he'd used at least 6 different names in the last year. That he'd been getting close to people across the city. Mostly women, but not only women. Sometimes coworkers, sometimes random neighbors. It wasn't about money or romance. He wasn't trying to scam people or catfish them. He was studying them, watching them, following them just enough to make contact and then sort of embed himself in their lives. And the scariest part was, he never did anything violent. At least not that they could prove. He just got close, waited until people let their guard down, and then things would start to go wrong. Missing keys, moved furniture, emails sent that no one remembered typing, pets that got sick, strange texts from unknown numbers that led nowhere. One girl woke up to find a chair placed at the foot of her bed. No signs of forced entry. No cameras catching anyone. Just a chair, like someone had been sitting there, watching her sleep. They didn't have enough on him to arrest him. That's what the detective told me. But they were monitoring him, hoping to build a stronger case. And they'd seen him meet me at the coffee shop earlier that night. Apparently, I was next. He didn't say those exact words, but he didn't need to. He told me not to contact Dean. Told me to block his number, which I'd already done by the time the detective was done talking. I asked how Dean found me. They weren't sure yet. Could have been from the app. Could have been something else. The detective said Dean was good at slipping into people's lives. Quietly. Slowly. The weirdest part, the cop didn't even seem that shocked by any of it. Like this wasn't even the first guy he'd seen like this. Like there were more Deans out there, doing the same thing in different cities, all blending in with normal people on normal dates. He walked me to the door, handed me a card with a number to call if I saw anything strange, and told me to be careful. Then he got back in his car and drove off. That was it. I stood in my lobby for a long time after that, just sort of staring at nothing. I don't even know how long. Eventually, I went upstairs, checked every window and door, even though I live on the 3rd floor and the place was locked up tight. I didn't sleep that night. Actually, I didn't sleep much for the next week. I kept waking up thinking I heard something in the kitchen or in the hallway. I started leaving the TV on, just for background noise. I deleted all my dating apps. I stopped taking the same route home from work. Every time I saw someone who looked even slightly like him, I turned the other way. I never saw Dean again. But every now and then, I'll get this weird sense that someone's watching. Like when I'm walking past certain buildings or waiting at a red light. Nothing dramatic. Just a flicker of something. Like a presence that shouldn't be there. Maybe it's nothing. But I keep the detective's card in my wallet. Just in case. I should have known something was off when she picked the bookstore. Not a coffee shop. Not dinner. Not a movie. A bookstore. And not one of those cozy indie ones either. This was a weird, mostly empty store in a half-dead strip mall, tucked between an old nail salon and some sketchy tax place that looked closed even during the day. I had to double-check the address twice before I walked in. We'd been talking for about a week. Her name was Gina. I matched with her on this app that I'd barely used, and she messaged me first. Her profile was simple. One close-up of her face, no smile, and another one of her sitting on the floor in front of a bunch of books. No group shots, no mirror selfies. She just looked. Quiet, I guess. Her messages were short too, but not rude. She just asked if I liked to read, said she didn't like bars, and then suggested we meet at this bookstore she liked. I figured it was quirky and different, and maybe she was just into quieter stuff. I wasn't expecting anything crazy. I figured it might even be refreshing. She was already inside when I got there. She didn't wave or say anything, just looked at me from the end of one of the aisles, then turned and walked further in. I followed her, thinking maybe she just didn't like attention or something. She had a small bag on her shoulder and wore this long dark coat, even though it was pretty warm out. Her hair was pulled back tight, no makeup, nothing flashy. She looked almost exactly like her photos, just quieter in real life. Not shy, more like distant. I caught up to her near the back of the store, where the shelves were older and everything smelled like dust and paper. She was already pulling books down, flipping through them, barely looking at me. I tried talking a little. Asked her what she liked to read, if she came here often, just normal first date stuff. She didn't answer. Not once. At first, I thought maybe she didn't hear me. I repeated a couple of things, tried to laugh it off. Nothing. She didn't even nod. She just kept reading. She'd take a book off the shelf, flip through it fast, then move on to the next one. Not browsing, more like scanning. Like she was looking for something specific, but not really reading anything. It was weirdly fast. I should have left. I really should have. But I didn't. I kept thinking maybe this was just her thing, that maybe she just needed a few minutes to warm up or whatever. I moved a little away and picked up a book myself, trying to act casual. After a few minutes, I looked up and saw that she was gone. She had moved about 5 aisles over without making a sound. I didn't even hear her footsteps. She was just standing there, facing the shelves, flipping through another book like nothing was strange. I walked over to her, more annoyed than anything, and stood nearby. Still no response. Not even a glance. She just kept flipping. It wasn't even the silence that got me. It was the way she moved. Everything was quiet, precise, almost rehearsed. Like someone mimicking how a person is supposed to act in a bookstore, but not really getting it right. She never read the back covers. Never opened to the first page. Just flipped through random sections, then put the book back, then grabbed another. Over and over. At one point, she pulled out this massive book from the bottom shelf. Something about religious symbols or ancient rituals, I think. It had a weird black cover with faded gold writing. She sat down right there on the floor, right in the middle of the aisle, and opened it on her lap. Still didn't say a word. Just started tracing her finger along one of the pages slowly, like she was following some kind of pattern. I asked if she was okay. She didn't even blink. She just kept reading. Then, for like 2 seconds, she looked at me. Just lifted her head slowly and stared. Her eyes didn't look tired or sad. They looked focused. Too focused. Like I was part of the background, and she was deciding whether I mattered or not. Then she looked back down and kept tracing the book. That's when I left. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't try to be polite. I just turned and walked out. And when I got to the front of the store, the guy at the register, this old guy with a stack of crossword puzzles next to him, didn't even look up. Like he'd seen this before. I walked out into the parking lot and just stood there for a bit, trying to make sense of what just happened. I wasn't scared, really. Just thrown off. The whole thing felt like I'd stumbled into a dream where the logic didn't work, but you go along with it anyway until you wake up. Later that night, I checked the app. Her profile was gone. Not unmatched. Just gone. Like she never existed on there. I even searched her name, first and last, since she gave me both, but nothing came up. No Instagram. No Facebook. No anything. I still had the chat history, though. I looked at it for a long time. Her first message had just said, "Do you read?" That's it. And the last thing. Sent while I was still in the bookstore, before I walked out. She messaged me again. Just one sentence. "You didn't stay long enough." I deleted the app after that. I've never been back to that bookstore, but I still drive past it sometimes. It's always half lit. Sometimes it looks closed even when it's not. I've never seen anyone walk in or out, and every time I pass it, I swear I see someone sitting on the floor in the back aisle, reading. It started off super normal. Just dinner at this sushi place downtown. A little overpriced, but I've been wanting to try it anyway. I met Josh through a friend of a friend. He wasn't a total stranger, and honestly, I thought that was supposed to make it safer. Like if someone knows him, then he's probably not insane, right? He picked me up, which maybe was dumb in hindsight. But I'd seen him around once or twice before, and we'd been texting all week. He seemed decent. Not super funny, not overly charming, but solid. A little quiet. Calm. He had this silver car, clean on the outside, but almost too spotless on the inside. No smell, no music playing, nothing hanging from the mirror. I noticed that right away, but didn't think much of it at the time. Dinner was all right. Not amazing, not awkward. He asked questions, answered mine. Didn't seem like he was distracted or bored or anything. I mean, there were a few moments where the conversation kind of stalled, but that happens. Sometimes he would just stare a little too long, like he was thinking about something else, but when I said something to break the silence, he snapped right back into it, smiled, nodded, ate his food. After we finished, I told him I could just grab a ride share home, but he offered to drive me. Said it was no problem. It was late, and I didn't feel like waiting outside alone. Dumb decision number 2. We got into his car, and I remember texting my roommate saying I was on my way. That was the last message I sent before everything went sideways. He pulled out of the parking lot, turned right instead of left. I noticed immediately. My place was to the left. I waited a few seconds, gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he knew a faster way, maybe he was avoiding traffic. But it wasn't the kind of area where you needed shortcuts. It was already late, and the streets were pretty empty. I asked if he was going the right way. He didn't answer. Just kept driving, calm as ever. Hands at 10 and 2, eyes on the road. Not tense, not angry. Just blank, like he was following steps. I laughed a little, tried to keep it casual, and asked again. This time, I made sure I looked right at him. He didn't look back. Just reached down slowly, hit the lock button. All the doors clicked shut. And then he kept driving. It didn't feel real at first. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the door handle, trying to remember if I had seen a child lock when I got in. I checked my phone. No signal. I held it low, tried to send another message, but it wouldn't go through. I turned the screen brightness down and kept it on my lap. Outside the window, the lights were getting further apart. Fewer buildings, more trees. I didn't even know this area. It felt like we were heading toward the outskirts. No houses, no businesses. Just dark roads and long stretches of nothing. I asked him again, trying not to sound scared. He finally glanced over, quick, like a reflex, and smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was small. Tight. The kind of smile you give when you already know something the other person doesn't. Then he said something. Just a few words. I won't repeat them here, because honestly, I've been trying to forget them. But they made it very clear that this wasn't some misunderstanding. He wasn't lost. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly where he was going, and he had already decided I was going with him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't try to grab the wheel or kick the door open, because I knew that would make it worse. I stayed still, kept my eyes forward, and tried to think. I remembered a turn we made earlier, a long curve with a sign I didn't read. I started counting in my head every time we passed a streetlight, just something to keep me focused. Then I noticed the air vents. They were blowing cold, really cold, even though the outside temp was mild. My skin started to sting a little, and I realized my breath was showing. It didn't make sense. I looked at the controls. He had the AC on full blast, all the way down. Why? I have no idea. But it added to the whole feeling that I was being slowly erased from the inside out. We drove like that for what felt like forever. At some point, he slowed down near a narrow gravel road. Barely a road. Really? More like a path. He turned in without saying anything. The sound of the tires crunching gravel was the loudest thing in the world. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face blank. I told myself I had one shot if I was going to get out. He reached down toward something. I don't know if it was his phone or something in the console, and that's when I moved. I hit the unlock button, grabbed the handle, and yanked the door open. The car wasn't stopped, but it was slow enough. I jumped. I hit the ground hard, rolled down the shallow ditch, scraped up my arms and hands. But I got up. I ran. I didn't look back. I just sprinted toward the first light I saw. A porch light way down the road, barely visible through the trees. I ran straight across grass and mud and rocks until I hit the front door of some random house. I banged on it until someone came. Some older woman opened the door, freaked out when she saw me, and pulled me inside. She called the cops. By the time they got there, he was gone. Disappeared like it never happened. But the police found tire tracks. They found a piece of his license plate on the gravel road. And later, they told me the name Josh wasn't his real name. I never found out who he actually was. The friend who supposedly knew him said they'd only met him once and didn't even have his number anymore. The number he used to text me. Burner. Disconnected a day later. So yeah, that was my first and last date with Josh. Or whatever his name was. I still don't know where he was taking me. And I really don't want to know. I wasn't even looking for anything serious when I matched with Sarah. I had just gotten out of a messy situation a few months before and was mostly swiping out of boredom. Her profile was simple. A few photos, one of her at a bookstore, one with a dog, and one where she was sitting outside at a cafe, sunglasses on, smiling just slightly. Her bio just said she liked Italian food, rainy weather, and weird movies. Nothing flashy. It was normal in a good way. We talked for about 3 days before we made plans to get dinner. She picked a restaurant downtown. Mid-range, nothing too fancy, but definitely not cheap. I offered to pick her up, but she said she'd meet me there. Seemed like she wanted to keep things low pressure. I didn't mind. She showed up about 5 minutes after I got there. Same girl from the photos. She was wearing a long beige coat, jeans, boots, subtle makeup. Honestly, I thought she looked better in person than in her photos. We got seated pretty fast and started talking. At first, everything seemed fine. She was easy to talk to. A little reserved, maybe, but not cold. She asked about my work, told me she freelanced in some kind of design thing. Branding? Packaging? I didn't totally get it, but she explained it well. We talked about random stuff. Childhood TV shows, favorite kinds of pizza, the worst places we traveled. It felt pretty normal. Nothing magical, but not weird. Then about 25 minutes in, right after our food arrived, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and suddenly got pale. Like instantly. She went quiet for a second, then said she was really sorry. Something had happened. A friend had been rushed to the hospital, and she had to leave. She stood up quickly, said she'd pay her half later, and left. I just kind of sat there, unsure what to do. I hadn't even touched my food yet. She was already outside by the time I turned to look. At first, I felt bad. I figured it must have been serious. She'd looked genuinely freaked out. I debated texting her to check in, but I didn't want to be pushy, so I just ate, paid the full bill, and left. That night, around midnight, I got a Venmo request from her. It just said, dinner, 42.50. No message, no emoji, nothing. That's when it started to feel weird. If something serious had just happened, like emergency room serious, why was she thinking about splitting the bill an hour later? And why not just text me to say what happened? I clicked on her profile, just out of curiosity. Her Venmo was public. That's where it got creepy. She had sent that exact same charge, dinner, 42.50, to 3 other people over the past few weeks. Same wording, all spaced a few days apart. I clicked on one of the names, looked them up on socials. One guy had posted a tweet 2 weeks ago that said, "Went on a date tonight, and the girl left mid-meal for a fake emergency, then Venmo'd me for her half. Is this a new scam?" My stomach dropped. I looked back at her Venmo history. There were patterns. Dinner charges, sometimes Uber, a few labeled drinks or my half. Always right around $30.50, always to guys. I Googled her name, the full name from her Venmo. Nothing came up right away. Then I went back to our messages in the app. Shiva matched me. Gone. No trace of our chat. Just vanished. At this point, I was in a weird headspace. I wasn't scared. It wasn't some dramatic crime. But it felt personal in a way that really messed with me. She had looked me in the eyes, laughed at my jokes, asked questions, and told stories. And the whole time she was just waiting for the right moment to leave. It wasn't even about the money. It was the planning behind it. The way she picked restaurants just pricey enough that someone would feel awkward paying alone. The way she played into that exact moment. Dramatic phone call, urgent exit, no explanation. It was all practiced. I didn't pay the Venmo request. I reported it. Then I blocked her profile. But I kept thinking about it. How many people had she done this to? Was she working alone? Was there a second person outside calling at the exact right time? What was the end goal? Was it just free meals and cash? Or was there more to it? I found a subreddit later that talked about dating scams. One of the threads described the exact thing that had happened to me. Girl leaves mid-date after a fake emergency, then requests money later. A few users even posted screenshots. Different names, but the method was the same. Maybe it was just a small scam. Low risk, low reward, but repeatable. Just enough to not set off alarms, but still creepy, still wrong. To this day, I haven't seen her again. But I do sometimes check Venmo, just out of curiosity. I'll search that same phrasing, dinner, 42.50, and see if it pops up. Sometimes it does, different profiles, different names, but the same move. I guess some people fake tragedy just to make a buck. And honestly, that's the part that sticks with you the most. The idea that someone would go out of their way to fake sadness just to get a free dinner. And that they'd do it again. And again. That was my one and only date with Sarah. If that was even her real name. I never thought a date would end with me standing in a room full of framed photos of terrified faces, but here I am. Honestly, if someone told me this story, I'd probably think it was one of those exaggerated internet tales. But nope, this actually happened. And it all started so casually. I met Luke on a dating app. His profile said he was a photographer, and he had a few pictures he took himself. Nothing super professional, just a few landscapes and candid shots of people that looked pretty cool. I don't know much about photography, but I thought it was interesting enough to spark a conversation. We decided to meet for dinner at this quirky little cafe tucked away on a side street downtown. It wasn't one of those super fancy spots, but definitely had some vibe. Exposed brick walls, dim lighting, a few plants hanging from the ceiling. Luke was easy to talk to, nothing weird or overly intense. Just a guy who liked his craft and seemed chill. We talked about his work, the places he traveled for shoots, music we liked, movies, all the usual first date stuff. After we ate, Luke mentioned that he had a small studio nearby and offered to do a free photo shoot for fun. He said it was just for practice, no pressure or anything. I was feeling pretty comfortable, and honestly, I thought it would be kind of cool, like a free mini makeover, maybe some fun pictures for my social media, or just to try something new. So, I agreed. We walked a few blocks to this building that looked kind of plain from the outside. No big signs, no windows showing the inside, just a steel door and a buzzer. Luke buzzed in, and the door opened. Inside, it was completely different. It was like stepping into a different world. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, and I could see photographs lining the walls right away. As we moved forward, I started noticing something odd. The pictures weren't the kind you'd expect in a photographer's studio. No bright smiles or casual poses. These were portraits of people who looked scared, like the photographer had caught them at their worst moments. Their eyes were wide, their faces tense, sometimes even tears streaked down their cheeks. It was uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was some kind of art project I just didn't understand. Luke unlocked another door and led me inside the studio itself. The room was bigger than I expected. Black walls, a few old wooden chairs, a couple of lights set up on stands. There was a backdrop, a plain gray one, and some props stacked to the side. He set up his camera and asked me to sit down, adjusting the lights around me. At first, he took simple shots, me sitting normally, just smiling or looking away. I tried to act natural, but I was starting to feel a little uneasy, like something was off, but I couldn't quite place it. Then, without warning, he asked me to take off my jacket. I shrugged, thinking it was part of the shoot. I didn't want to seem difficult. Then he asked me to change poses, more serious, less smiley, like he wanted to capture something deeper. As the shoot went on, the atmosphere shifted. He started getting closer, adjusting my hair, my face, telling me to hold my head a certain way, tilt my chin down, look into the camera like I was afraid of it. It felt less like a casual photo shoot and more like he was trying to capture some raw, dark emotion. I felt my skin tighten, my stomach twist, but I told myself it was just art, right? Then he pulled out a different lens, one that looked bigger and heavier. Suddenly, the photos started getting more intense. He asked me to look away, then to look scared, like I was in trouble. The lights dimmed, and I realized he was snapping pictures faster and faster. That's when I noticed the photos on the wall again. I recognized the style, the lighting, the expressions. It was exactly what he was trying to get from me. Faces frozen in fear, vulnerability laid bare in every frame. I wanted to stop. I wanted to say no, to get up and leave. But something about the way he looked at me, not angry, not threatening, just completely focused, kept me frozen. It wasn't aggressive, but it was relentless. At one point, he asked me to take off my shirt. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought he could hear it. I hesitated, my voice caught in my throat, but he insisted, saying it was part of the shoot, it would be artistic, tasteful. I didn't want to do it, but I also felt trapped. Like if I said no, the whole thing would blow up. So, I slowly took it off, hands shaking. I felt completely exposed. He kept clicking. The camera shutter was loud in the quiet room. Every picture felt like it was stripping away more than just my clothes. When it was finally over, he told me he'd send the pictures to me. I felt numb. I grabbed my jacket and left quickly, not even looking back. Outside, the air felt sharp against my skin, and I realized how cold I was. I'd walked home in a daze, replaying everything in my head. What had just happened? Why did I let it go that far? The next day, I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I messaged him to ask for the pictures, but no reply. I started Googling the studio's address and his name. Nothing. No website, no social media, no reviews. It was like the place and the person didn't exist. Then I thought about the photos on the walls. Who were those people? Did they know what kind of shoot they were agreeing to? Were they scared like I was? I checked my phone gallery, hoping he'd accidentally sent me some pictures. There was nothing. Weeks went by. I tried to push it out of my mind, but every time I closed my eyes, I could see those scared faces staring back at me. I never heard from Luke again. The studio vanished. The whole thing felt like a nightmare that was real. Something dark hiding behind an ordinary night out. And that's my story. A first date that turned into a trap, with photos as proof. Not the kind of memories you want to keep. I still can't believe what happened that night. I thought online dating was just awkward and maybe a little boring sometimes, but this was on another level. The kind of thing you hear about in stories, but never expect to actually live through. It all started when I matched with a girl named Alice. Her profile seemed pretty normal. Some photos of her smiling, a few outdoorsy shots of her hiking or at the beach, nothing that screamed, too good to be true. She looked like someone I could get along with, and after a few chats, we decided to meet for dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place I figured would be good for talking and breaking the ice. I got there early, hoping to calm my nerves by ordering a drink and watching the door. I checked my phone a few times, making sure I wasn't missing her arrival. When she finally walked in, my stomach dropped. This wasn't the girl from the pictures. She looked at least 10 years older than the photos suggested. Her hair was a dull brown, not shiny or styled like in her pictures, and it looked like it hadn't been washed recently. She wore a coat that looked threadbare and stained, something I definitely wouldn't have expected from someone who seemed to care about their appearance online. I kept telling myself maybe the lighting was bad, or the photos were just really old, or maybe the filters had worked their magic. Maybe she was just nervous. But then she walked over, and the moment she spoke, my confusion deepened. She said a name that wasn't Alice. Her voice was rough and hoarse, much deeper than I'd imagined, and it didn't match the cheerful girl I thought I'd be meeting. My mind scrambled. I looked back at her profile on my phone, hoping I had made a mistake. The photos were there, bright, young, smiling. But looking up at her face, I saw none of it. She didn't explain or apologize for the switch. Instead, she said she'd been through some stuff, that the photos were from years ago, and that I shouldn't be upset. Her tone wasn't defensive, but it wasn't remorseful either. It was like she expected me to just accept it, and maybe I should have walked out right then. But I didn't want to cause a scene, and a part of me still hoped maybe there was more to the story. So we sat down, and I tried to make conversation, but it was strained. It felt like talking to a stranger pretending to be someone else, and every answer she gave felt like a carefully scripted lie. When I asked about her job, she was vague, saying she was between things or figuring stuff out. Questions about where she lived or what she liked to do on weekends were met with the same evasive answers. It was like pulling teeth, and I kept wondering why she'd use someone else's pictures if she didn't want me to know who she really was. The food arrived, but I barely touched it. The restaurant, which had seemed cozy at first, suddenly felt claustrophobic and suffocating. I kept glancing around, hoping someone would come to rescue me from this uncomfortable situation. She, meanwhile, kept staring at me like she was waiting for something, waiting for me to say something, or maybe just waiting for me to stay. Then, out of nowhere, she pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of a younger woman she said was her niece. The girl in the photo looked exactly like the woman in the profile pictures I'd seen. My heart started racing. It hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't Alice. She was someone else entirely, using her niece's photos to lure people in. I felt a creeping dread in my chest, but I didn't want to make a scene or blow everything up right there. I stayed quiet, pretending like I hadn't just uncovered this massive lie. When the bill came, she said she forgot her wallet and asked if I could cover it. I hesitated, but at that point, I just wanted the night to end as quickly as possible, so I paid. I left the restaurant with my head spinning, wondering how easily I'd been tricked. After I got home, I checked the dating app again. Her profile was gone. Deleted like she'd never existed. I tried to report the account, hoping to warn others or at least prevent her from doing this to more people, but I got nowhere. The app's support team never responded, or maybe they just didn't take it seriously. I never heard from her again. No messages, no calls, nothing. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many other people she's done this to, showing up as someone they're not, pretending to be a relative of the girl in the pictures, making up stories on the spot to cover her tracks. That night didn't just feel weird. It felt like I'd stepped into something dark, something I wasn't supposed to see. And the worst part, there was no big conclusion or lesson. No dramatic confrontation or shocking reveal. Just a date that wasn't a date at all. Just a reminder that some people are better at pretending than you think, and that you can never really know who's on the other side of the screen. Sometimes, I catch myself scrolling through dating apps again, wondering if I'm ready to put myself out there, or if I'll just run into another Alice who's really someone else entirely. It's scary how easy it is to be fooled, and how dangerous it feels knowing there might be someone out there doing this on purpose, turning people's trust into a twisted game. I don't want to be bitter, but I can't shake the feeling that online dating isn't just awkward or a little disappointing. It can be downright unsettling. You think you're meeting someone who wants to get to know you, but sometimes you're just a mark in a story they've rehearsed 1,000 times before. That night changed how I look at things, not just online dating, but people in general. It made me more cautious, sure, but also more aware that sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters. Sometimes they're the people sitting right across the table from you, wearing someone else's face and telling lies like they're truths. So yeah, that's the story of the night I met someone who wasn't who she said she was, and the uncomfortable, eerie feeling of realizing you've been played in the quietest, most unsettling way possible. You think you know what could happen on a first date until you get caught in something that feels like a trap, but there's no way out. I never thought I'd end up stuck in a stranger's apartment wondering if I'd ever leave, but that's exactly what happened when I met Kevin. We'd met on one of those dating apps. You know, the usual swiping right, messaging back and forth. Nothing too serious at first. Kevin seemed normal enough. We matched, exchanged a few messages about music, movies, favorite restaurants, and then finally decided to meet. We chose a casual spot for dinner, somewhere low-key where we could talk without too much noise or pressure. At the restaurant, Kevin was polite and charming. Maybe a little quiet, but not in a creepy way. We talked about our favorite bands, the movies we were looking forward to, places we traveled. Everything felt fine, even normal. After dinner, He suggested grabbing a drink at his place nearby. I didn't think twice about it. Just a few drinks to keep the night going, maybe laugh a little more, then head home. I figured it was safe enough. When we got inside his apartment, though, everything shifted. The place was tidy, but it felt sterile, almost unnervingly so, like stepping into a museum with no visitors. The walls were bare, no personal photos or decorations. The furniture was old and mismatched, but clean. It was just empty. That quietness made my skin crawl. Kevin closed the door behind us and locked it. That wasn't unusual, I thought. Plenty of people lock their doors for privacy. But then I noticed something odd. There was no handle on the inside of the door. I looked at it again, tracing my hand over the smooth surface. No latch, no knob, nothing. The only way to open it was with a key. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a quirk of the apartment, maybe a security feature I hadn't seen before. But then I glanced at the windows, and my heart started pounding. They were sealed shut. Not just locked, but no way to even crack them open. No screens, no sliding panels, just thick glass pressed tight against the frame. It was suffocating. I told myself to calm down. Maybe Kevin was just a bit unusual, and I was overthinking things. But then he smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Calm, composed, but not warm or welcoming. It was the kind of smile that felt like a warning or a secret he was keeping, the kind of smile someone gives when they know something you don't, and it's not good. "Why would you want to leave?" he said quietly. "We're just getting started." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I asked if I could get my phone to check messages or call a friend. Kevin said it was charging in his room and motioned for me to follow. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to cause a scene either. Maybe if I stayed calm, I could figure something out. As we moved through the apartment, I took a quick mental inventory. It was small, a cramped living room, a tiny kitchen, one bedroom, and a bathroom. I glanced toward every possible exit, but the front door was the only way in or out. The windows remained sealed, unyielding. When I tried to open the door again, I pressed my hands hard against it, testing the lock. It didn't budge. No handle, no latch, completely locked. My mind raced. I felt panic rising like a wave threatening to crash over me. Kevin noticed my growing discomfort but said nothing about it. Instead, he poured us both drinks, handing me a glass. I didn't want it, but I took it anyway. I didn't want to provoke him. The air in the apartment started feeling thick, almost suffocating. The silence between Kevin's words and my thoughts grew heavier. Every time he spoke, I nodded, but my eyes kept drifting to the door, the windows, anywhere that could be an escape. I tried texting my friends, hoping to get a signal to call for help, but there was none. No bars, no Wi-Fi. It was like I was completely cut off from the world. Kevin moved calmly around the apartment, like he owned the space and the moment. It hit me then. He'd done this before. This wasn't a random, harmless date gone wrong. This was a setup, a trap designed so no one could leave without his permission. Hours seemed to crawl by. Maybe it was minutes, maybe longer. Time lost meaning in that cramped, silent space. The air grew colder, and I felt myself getting lightheaded. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but fear gnawed at me. I searched the apartment again, looking for anything. A vent, a loose panel, a hidden key. But there was nothing. The place was airtight. Finally, when Kevin excused himself to use the bathroom, I made one last attempt at the door. I pressed harder, pushed with my shoulder, but it wouldn't give. The lock held firm. I sank down onto the worn couch, heart racing, mind spinning. That smile haunted me. Why would you want to leave? We're just getting started. What did you mean? What had I gotten myself into? The night dragged on, colder and darker. I sat there, trapped in a stranger's home, watching the locked door, wishing I could disappear through the sealed windows. Every minute felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. There was no dramatic fight, no heroic escape, no sudden rescue by a friend or stranger. Just the crushing realization that I was caught, alone, helpless, stuck in a nightmare disguised as a first date. I don't know how long I stayed there, or what time it was when Kevin finally opened the door again. I don't even know if he ever planned to let me go. All I know is that from that night on, the line between a normal date and a nightmare disappeared behind that locked door. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that smile echoing in my head. I honestly thought the date was going well at first. Shelley seemed cool, funny, smart, and she actually listened when I talked, which isn't always the case with dates. There was this easy flow to our conversation, like we were on the same wavelength. She laughed at my jokes, even the lame ones, and asked questions about things I cared about. It felt like a real connection was forming, and for a moment, I let myself hope maybe this could go somewhere. But even from the start, there was something a little off. Shelley kept checking her phone. Not just glancing occasionally like most people do, but almost constantly. Like, every couple of minutes, she'd pull it out and start typing or scrolling. I told myself maybe she was nervous or maybe waiting on some important message. I wasn't going to be the guy who complains about phone use on a date. Everyone gets distracted sometimes, right? So I tried to ignore it. We met at this small, kind of artsy cafe downtown. It was quiet enough to talk without shouting, but still had that cool vibe. Exposed brick walls, little plants hanging from the ceiling, the smell of fresh coffee everywhere. I liked it because it wasn't too formal or awkward, and Shelley seemed to like it too. She ordered a cappuccino, I got an iced tea, and we settled in at a table by the window. For the first half hour, things were all right. She was engaged, at least on the surface, asking me about my job, my favorite bands, what I did for fun. I could tell she was smart, and her quick wit caught me off guard a few times. I started to think maybe this wasn't going to be one of those painfully awkward first dates where you just count the minutes until you can leave. But then the phone thing started to get worse. Shelley's face would turn toward me like she was paying attention, but her eyes were on the screen. Her thumbs would fly over the keyboard like she was playing some kind of game, or maybe just texting nonstop. Sometimes she'd chuckle quietly, and I thought maybe she was reading something funny, so I'd smile, trying to join in. But she never showed me what was on the screen, and the laughs never came my way. It started to feel weird, like I was talking into a void, and she was half there. I remember one moment clearly. I was telling her about a concert I'd been to recently, something I was excited about, and halfway through the story, I noticed she wasn't looking at me at all. She was completely absorbed in her phone, fingers tapping away. It stung, but I didn't say anything. Then it got worse. Halfway through the date, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Jenna. She was at a bar nearby and had sent me a screenshot. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a group chat, a private one, and the messages were about me. Shelley was live texting everything I said and did, word for word, to a bunch of people. And they were roasting me hard. Making fun of my voice, the way I laughed, even my food order. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe Jenna sent me the wrong screenshot, or maybe someone else's chat got mixed up. But the timing matched perfectly. Every dumb thing I said, every awkward pause, it was all there, typed out like some kind of script for everyone else to laugh at. The messages were brutal. They called me weird, try hard, and worse. There were even pictures Shelley had secretly taken of me. Candid shots where I wasn't paying attention. Sent to the group with snarky captions like, "Look at this dude trying so hard," and "Who laughs like that?" I felt my face go hot, my hands tremble. I stared down at my phone, heart pounding, and suddenly the cafe felt like it was closing in on me. The chatter around us sounded distant and distorted, like I was underwater. Shelley smiled at me across the table like everything was normal, probably texting away right then, typing out the next line for her private audience. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her for being so cruel, but I also didn't want to make a scene or look like I was overreacting. I felt trapped in this horrible moment where the person I was starting to trust was just using me as entertainment for her friends. All the things I'd said, the effort I'd put into being interesting or funny, felt like a joke, one I wasn't in on. I glanced up at her, searching for any sign of remorse or embarrassment. But there was nothing, just that same distracted, amused expression, as if she was playing some game I didn't know the rules to. I swallowed hard and quietly packed up my things. No goodbye, no explanation. I just walked out of the cafe and into the cold night air, feeling like I needed to wash off the whole thing. I wanted to disappear. That night, I kept looking at that screenshot Jenna had sent me. I didn't delete it. Not because I wanted to hold onto the pain, but because it was a reminder. A reminder of how people can hide behind their phones and put on a mask of interest, while actually using someone as a punchline. It wasn't about me, really, it was about whatever game Shelley was playing. Maybe it made her feel powerful or in control. Maybe it was just cruel fun. Whatever it was, I never wanted to be part of it again. Since then, I've been wary of how much attention I give to someone who's glued to their phone, especially on a first date. I've learned that sometimes, when someone seems interested, they might just be performing, not for you, but for an audience you don't even know exists. So yeah, that's the story. No dramatic confrontation, no big showdown. Just a night where someone wasn't who I thought they were, and I got used for a joke I never saw coming. And honestly, that kind of betrayal, the kind you don't expect, from someone you thought cared, hurts more than any argument ever could. It all started on that first date with David, and honestly, it should have been normal. Dinner at a tiny cafe, nothing too fancy, just some laughs and coffee. But right from the start, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the air seemed heavier, or how my gut kept twisting into knots, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. We met at this little hole-in-the-wall place downtown, the kind of cafe that's cozy and has a mix of mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh pastries. David seemed nice enough, friendly in that easygoing way that made you feel like you could talk about anything. We settled into a corner booth and started chatting about the usual first date stuff: work, hobbies, favorite movies. He laughed at my jokes and shared some stories that made me smile. For a moment, I almost forgot the weird feeling creeping in the back of my mind. But then I noticed it. Outside the window, across the street, there was someone sitting alone on a bench, just watching. They weren't glaring or staring directly at us, not in an obvious way that would make you look twice. But there was something about how they lingered, how they didn't seem to move or look away, that made me pause. My eyes flicked back to David, who was smiling and sipping his coffee, oblivious to whatever was making me uneasy. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe just some random person waiting for a friend or on their own date. Cities have plenty of people after all, but the feeling stuck like a dull ache in my chest. After dinner, David suggested we take a walk in the park nearby. It was a nice night, cool air, the faint smell of jasmine, street lamps casting pools of golden light on the pavement. We walked side by side, talking about music and travel, trying to keep the mood light. But as we crossed the street to enter the park, I saw the same figure again. There they were, sitting on a bench not too far away, almost like they'd been waiting for us. I didn't say anything, not wanting to sound paranoid, but my skin crawled. The way this person was just there, silent and still, watching us, felt wrong. I glanced at David, hoping he'd notice too, but he didn't. When we started walking through the park, I kept stealing glances over my shoulder. The figure wasn't following us closely, but they were definitely there, shifting from one bench to another, keeping us in sight. Every time I looked, they seemed to disappear just for a moment and then reappear somewhere else. It was like a shadow I couldn't shake. David laughed when I mentioned it, trying to make a joke about me having a secret admirer or some stalker. "Relax," he said, flashing that half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe they just liked the park. But it didn't feel like a joke to me. The unease was growing, tightening around my throat like an invisible noose. I started to question everything. Was this person really just a stranger, or was there something more sinister at play? We left the park and headed back toward my neighborhood. The streets were quieter now, only a few cars passing, the streetlights flickering. And there, just a few houses down from mine, I saw the figure again. This time, they were standing, motionless, right across the street, looking directly at me. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run, to call out to David to get me out of there, but I felt frozen. David noticed my stiffening posture and shot me a sideways glance. "What's wrong?" he asked casually. "There's someone watching us," I whispered. David chuckled and shook his head. "You're overthinking it. Probably just some weirdo." But the way he said it didn't comfort me. In fact, it made me more suspicious. His laugh sounded forced, like he was hiding something. When we reached my front door, I quickly unlocked it and slipped inside. I looked back down the street, heart still racing, but the figure was gone. For now. Over the next few days, the image of that person stayed with me. I kept replaying the night in my mind, trying to convince myself I'd imagined some of it. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. When David and I texted and talked after the date, I tried to bring it up again, hoping he'd be more honest or at least concerned. But every time I asked about the person, he got vague, changing the subject or cracking jokes that didn't land. Once, I mentioned how creepy it felt to be watched, and he said, "Maybe they just think you're interesting." His responses felt rehearsed, like he was deflecting for a reason. It wasn't just the presence of the watcher that scared me. It was David's strange reaction to it, like he was protecting something or someone. I began to wonder if the person was connected to him. Maybe a friend, a stranger he knew, someone he'd sent to follow me. The thought was so chilling, I didn't want to admit it aloud. But everything about that night, the way David shrugged it off, made me feel like I was part of some twisted setup. I stopped replying as much. The texts dried up. When he called, I answered less often, and when I did, I kept it short. I wanted to get away from all of it, the watching, the uncertainty, the lie I felt I'd been wrapped up in. The worst part was the feeling that never really went away, the sensation that I was still being watched, even when I was alone. My phone would buzz sometimes, messages from unknown numbers, silent calls that ended before I could pick up. I checked my apartment windows obsessively, looking for shadows or reflections. David never admitted anything. He never apologized or explained. There was no big reveal or confrontation. Just that lingering doubt, like a shadow hanging over everything. I tried to tell myself it was over, that maybe the watcher was just some coincidence, a stranger passing through my life. But when I see someone on the street who looks too familiar, or catch a glimpse of a figure out of the corner of my eye, my heart still skips a beat. That first date wasn't just awkward or disappointing. It was the beginning of something I never wanted to be part of. A story where trust was a lie, and the person I thought I knew was hiding a secret that left me feeling exposed and unsafe. And sometimes, that's the scariest kind of horror. Not monsters or ghosts, but the people who stand closest to you watching, waiting, while you wonder if you'll ever really know the truth. So, it started out normal enough. I went on this date with a girl named Barry. Nothing wild, just dinner at this low-key diner downtown. The kind of place where the booths are vinyl, the neon signs buzz softly outside, and the waitress knows your order before you finish staying it. She was funny, smart, and honestly, I thought maybe this could be something. We talked about music, movies, random stuff that made me laugh. The conversation flowed easier than I expected, and when we finally said goodbye that night, the texts started coming in. Pretty chill stuff like, "Had fun," and "Let's do this again." I figured that was standard, right? The usual "let's see where this goes" vibe. At first, everything seemed normal. We messaged back and forth, nothing crazy, just the kind of light talk you'd expect after a first date. But then things started to shift, subtly at first. The texts came more often, like a lot more, until they weren't just texts anymore. The calls started. They'd pop up at all hours, sometimes right when I was about to fall asleep, my phone lighting up in the dark. I'd ignore them, but they'd keep ringing over and over. It wasn't like a normal, "Hey, what's up?" call either. It felt like she was waiting for me to pick up, and every time I didn't, the calls just kept coming. I tried to chalk it up to excitement or nerves. I didn't want to be mean or blow things out of proportion. Then, out of nowhere, Barry showed up at my job. Not at some casual time either. Right in the middle of the afternoon when I was busy, totally caught off guard. I was behind the counter, and suddenly there she was, smiling like it was totally normal to just pop in unannounced. I froze. How did she even know where I worked? I hadn't told her anything specific about my job, just vague details like I work downtown. She acted all casual, like she was dropping by a friend's place, but inside I was freaking out. I didn't know how to react. When I tried to bring it up later, she laughed it off, saying she just wanted to see me, like that was some kind of romantic gesture. That's when the feeling of being trapped started to set in. I thought, okay, maybe she's just clingy, maybe she doesn't really realize how intense she's being, and it'll blow over. Except it didn't. If anything, it got worse. Next, Barry started showing up at my apartment. No warning, no texts, no calls, just there. Like she'd materialized out of nowhere, knowing exactly when I'd be home or where I'd be hanging out. I started locking the doors and windows extra tight, even putting up that little chain lock on the front door, but somehow she still found ways to get to me. Gifts on my doorstep. Sometimes flowers I never asked for. Sometimes weird little trinkets. Even handwritten notes that felt way too personal. The kind of notes that made you wonder if someone was watching you all the time, memorizing every little thing about your life. I tried telling her it was too much, that I needed space, but she'd just smile, like it was a game to her. She acted like all this was normal, like she was the only one who knew how to make this work. Eventually, I had to block her number. I thought that would stop it. Nope. The messages started coming from different numbers, like she had a whole lineup of phones. Every time I blocked one, another would pop up. The texts became more intense, more desperate, like she was spiraling, but still watching my every move. It wasn't just annoyance or clinginess anymore. It was full-on obsession, the kind that messes with your head and doesn't let you forget for a second that someone is tracking your life. Work became a nightmare. She kept showing up there too. My coworkers started noticing, asking if I was okay or if something was going on. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to admit that a girl I'd gone on one date with was turning my life into a living nightmare. I felt like I was being hunted by someone I barely knew, someone who had decided, without warning or reason, that I was theirs. One night, I stayed at a friend's place just to get away for a bit. I thought maybe if I changed my routine, if I switched up where I slept, maybe she'd give up. But no, she showed up there too. Banging on the door, refusing to leave, screaming my name like it was some twisted declaration of love. My friend had to call the cops, but by the time they arrived, she was gone, vanished like a ghost. That's when I realized this wasn't just a crush or a bad date. It was full-on obsession, and she didn't care about boundaries or consequences. I tried everything after that. Changing my phone number, blocking her on social media, even talking to the police and filing a report. But she was always one step ahead, somehow knowing where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I never had before. The excitement I felt after that first date, the spark that made me think maybe I'd met someone worth knowing, was gone. It was replaced by this heavy weight of fear and confusion that pressed down on me every day. I don't know what Barry wanted or why she picked me. I don't know if she realized how far she'd gone or if she just didn't care. All I knew was that my life was no longer mine to control, that I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if she was watching from the shadows. And the worst part, it's still going. Even now, months later, I sometimes get messages from unknown numbers, or catch a glimpse of a figure on the street that looks a little too familiar. The nightmare hasn't ended. It's just shifted, morphed into this constant low-level dread that never quite goes away. What started as a simple, let's see each other again, turned into a nightmare I never expected to live through. When someone you barely know becomes the person who makes you question every moment you're alone, every place you go, it changes everything. I'm sharing this not because I want sympathy or pity, but because maybe someone else out there is dealing with the same kind of thing and feels just as lost and scared. Sometimes, the hardest part is knowing that the person you once saw as a possibility can become the one thing you want to escape from the most. And sometimes you don't get a clean ending. You just have to keep moving forward, hoping that one day you'll finally be free. Okay, so this one night still messes with me when I think about it. I had been talking to this guy Ken for a couple of weeks. He seemed chill enough, funny in texts, and I was feeling like maybe I'd give online dating one more shot. He asked me to come over to his place for a low-key date. I wasn't really expecting anything wild, just dinner and some hanging out. I mean, meeting at someone's home felt kind of old school, but I figured it'd be more relaxed than a noisy bar or coffee shop. When I got there, the first thing that hit me was how quiet the building was. It was one of those older apartment complexes, not sketchy exactly, but definitely had a weird vibe. I buzzed him, he let me in, and I followed him up to his apartment on the 3rd floor. The hallway was dim, a little cramped, and I was already starting to wonder if I made a mistake agreeing to this. The moment I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. The walls were covered in photos. Not like regular framed pictures or anything cute. They were taped all over, dozens of them. Pictures of people I didn't recognize. Some faces looked scared, some looked sad, others just blank and uncomfortable. None of the pictures seemed staged. It was like someone had just grabbed random shots of people who weren't happy to be there. I tried to glance around, pretending it was nothing, but Ken was watching me closely. The kind of look that makes your skin crawl, like he knew exactly what I was thinking but was daring me to say it out loud. Then he told me those were his old dates, that he kept them as memories. The way he said it made my mouth go dry. I stood there, frozen, looking at all those faces stuck to the peeling wallpaper. I realized some of them looked like they were trying to smile, but their eyes told a different story. One girl was biting her lip nervously. Another guy's face was tense, almost angry. It felt like they were trapped in those pictures, reminders of something ugly that happened after the photo was taken. Ken smiled this weird, satisfied grin, then motioned toward the couch like everything was totally normal. I sat down, trying to convince myself I wasn't about to get pulled into something bad. I kept scanning the walls, wondering how many of those people actually made it out of whatever situation they had been stuck in with him. He told me all these stories about his dates, how he met them, but it was clear his version was twisted, like he was proud of the control he had over them. I didn't want to stay long, but I was trapped between trying to be polite and freaking out. The whole apartment was small, and I didn't see an easy way to just leave without him noticing. I'd noticed other things too. Old phones, dozens of them stacked in a corner, some cracked, some with the screen blacked out. There were notebooks filled with names, dates, and short notes. It felt like a catalog, like he was keeping track of every person who ever stepped foot inside his place. I tried to come up with a reason to leave, but every time I opened my mouth, he'd smile and say something that made me pause, like he knew I was thinking about walking out. His eyes were always on me, and suddenly I felt like a bug caught in a jar. I didn't want to get violent or start yelling, because who knows what he was capable of. I kept my voice calm and just waited for a moment when I could get up and go. The night went on with him telling me stuff I didn't want to hear, and I tried to focus on my phone, thinking maybe I could call someone if things got worse. At one point, I realized my jacket was missing. I hadn't put it down anywhere, and that's when I felt the cold pit in my stomach. Was he planning to keep me there? Or maybe he was waiting for me to freak out so he could use that against me somehow. Eventually, I managed to say I needed some fresh air. He reluctantly let me out of the room, and I grabbed my jacket from the floor near the door. He must have thrown it there. I practically ran out of the apartment, my heart hammering like crazy. I didn't even look back. When I got back on the street, I called a friend and told them what I'd seen. I couldn't stop thinking about those pictures, how many of those people were real, and what happened to them after the photos were taken. I kept wondering if Ken was still out there, still waiting for the next date to add to his collection. I never responded to his messages again, blocked every number, but the memory of those walls covered in scared faces is something I can't forget. It wasn't just creepy. It was something darker, something that felt like a warning to anyone who ever thought about stepping inside his place. That night, what was supposed to be just a simple date became something straight out of a nightmare I didn't want to wake up from. Alright, this one still messes with me when I think about it. It started off like any other normal first date. I met this girl, Ashley, through a dating app. She seemed cool enough, witty, a little sarcastic, quick to reply, and somehow had this subtle edge of mystery that made me curious. Her profile wasn't too over the top. It wasn't filled with filtered selfies or overused quotes. Just a few low-key photos, some clever bio lines, and a vibe that felt a little different. The kind of different that hooks you, makes you think maybe there's more beneath the surface. We decided to meet up at a small cafe downtown. One of those cozy spots tucked into the corner of a block, the kind where the lights are soft, the music is lo-fi and indie, and the coffee tastes just a little too artisanal for its own good. Still, it was nice. It felt chill, casual, which is exactly what I wanted. A space where conversation could actually happen. But almost immediately, something about the way Ashley acted didn't sit right with me. She was charming, no doubt. Good at asking questions, good at laughing in the right places, but she kept holding her phone in strange ways. At first, I didn't pay much attention. People always fiddle with their phones. But then I noticed it wasn't just casual scrolling. Her phone was angled oddly, screen inward, almost tucked into her coat or angled toward her bag. She kept subtly adjusting the collar of her coat like she was shielding something. And then there was her watch. This thick, oversized thing with a faint black dot at the center that looked a little too much like a camera lens. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But it gave me a chill when I caught it staring at me under the table. Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem paranoid or weird. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she had social anxiety. Maybe she was just self-conscious. I tried to push it out of my head, focus on the conversation, the date. She was funny, and she listened well, even if some of her reactions felt slightly off, like she was laughing at a joke I hadn't told yet. Sometimes she'd pause right after I said something, then smile in this staged way, not fake, exactly, but practiced, like someone hitting their mark in a scene. After coffee, we walked through a nearby park. The sun was just starting to set, and the paths were lit with dim golden light. It should have been peaceful, maybe even romantic. But she kept up the same behavior, subtly angling her coat inward toward her phone, glancing at her watch more than anyone should, pulling the collar higher as if the wind had suddenly picked up. At one point, I noticed her lips moving slightly, like she was whispering to herself, or narrating. That's when it really hit me. Something was off. Really off. Still, I let the night play out. We said our goodbyes, exchanged vague plans to hang out again. And that was that. I went home trying to shake the weirdness. For a while, I managed to convince myself I was being dramatic. I didn't tell anyone about the odd vibe. I didn't want to make a big deal out of something that might have just been nerves, hers or mine. But then, 2 days later, I got a message from a friend. It was just a link and one sentence. "Is this you?" I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the link, and it took me to this obscure-looking streaming page, something I'd never seen before. The layout was janky, like some back-alley version of Twitch or YouTube Live. No ads. No branding. Just a black screen with a paused video feed. And then, suddenly, it loaded. It was me. Not just a clip, the entire date. From the cafe to the park. Every movement, every word, captured from multiple angles. The hidden phone in her coat, the lens on her watch, maybe even more I hadn't noticed. The footage was eerily clear. The way I laughed. The way I sipped my coffee. The way I looked around nervously when she adjusted her collar. It was all there. There was a live chat window on the side. Dozens of usernames. People laughing, making comments about my face, my voice, the way I fidgeted when I talked. Some were just trolls, but others were invested. Too invested. Saying things like, "Ooh, this one's awkward. I like it." Or, "Ashley's got a good catch today. This dude's a thinker." As if I was some animal in a zoo or an actor in a show I didn't know I was starring in. My heart started pounding. I couldn't breathe. I clicked out of the stream, then back in, hoping I'd made a mistake. But it was still there. It wasn't a recording. It was streaming. Live. Someone, somewhere, was still watching. And it didn't stop there. I scrolled through the site and found more streams. More victims. Different names. Different faces. All recorded the same way. All completely unaware. That's when I really started to panic. I started digging. Forums, Reddit threads, anonymous blogs. And sure enough, I found others talking about Ashley. Or rather, women like her. Fake names. Different profiles. One account would disappear. Then a new one would pop up weeks later. Same methods. Same secret streams. A ghost pattern of digital footprints that led nowhere. I blocked her number. Deleted the app. Reported the site. Reported her profile. I even tried to file a report with a dating app. But by then, the account was already gone. Wiped like it never existed. The app said there was no record of her. No chats. Nothing. I don't know what her endgame was. Money. Entertainment. A twisted hobby. I don't know if she's still out there, doing the same thing to someone else right now. But the thought of it, the way she tricked me into thinking it was just a date, when really I was content for her private show, still haunts me. It's made me question every interaction since. Every stranger with a phone pointed vaguely in my direction. Every oversized watch. Every date where something feels just a little too curated. I don't know how many people she fooled, or how many versions of me are floating out there on private servers or anonymous forums. I never saw Ashley again, but I still feel like she sees me. And that's the worst part. Not the date, not the betrayal, but the sense that someone, somewhere, is still watching. I thought this was going to be a normal first date. Just two people, grabbing dinner, trying to figure each other out. That's what dating's supposed to be, right? You meet someone, maybe there's chemistry, maybe not, but either way, you go in hoping for something simple. I met Paul through an app. His messages were polite, a little dry, but not red flag dry, just cautious. Reserved. I figured maybe he was one of those slow to open up types. Honestly, that was kind of refreshing. We decided to meet at a tiny diner on the edge of the city, tucked between an auto shop and a thrift store that never seemed open. I wouldn't usually go to that part of town alone, but there was something oddly charming about the location. It felt like a quiet little secret. The diner had these big red booths, cracked leather that smelled like old coffee and grease, and an ancient jukebox in the corner that sometimes buzzed to life on its own. It was the kind of place where time felt slow, like the outside world didn't exist past the windows. I liked it. I thought it might make for a unique memory. But something felt off almost immediately. Paul was already there when I arrived, sitting in the farthest booth, facing the door. That struck me as odd. Most people pick a seat without thinking. But he was angled just enough that he could see everyone who walked in. His posture was too perfect, like he was trying to look relaxed, but forgot how that worked. He stood when I walked over, smiled, said my name. Polite, pleasant, but distant. We ordered food, and at first, the conversation was smooth enough. Nothing thrilling, but comfortable. He asked about my job, my family, my hobbies. He listened intently, like he was taking mental notes. I asked him the same things, but his answers were always a bit hazy, like someone describing a life that didn't quite belong to them. Then came the first disappearance. He excused himself to take a call. He was polite about it, even apologetic. I figured, okay, no big deal. Everyone has a life outside a first date. But he was gone for 20 minutes. 20. I sat there, poking at my fries, trying not to feel awkward, glancing toward the bathroom door every couple minutes. When he finally returned, he acted like he'd been gone for 2. No explanation, no sign of urgency, just slid back into the booth and picked up the conversation where we left off. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't mention the call. Just smiled, like everything was fine. The second time he vanished, I caught a glimpse of him outside. Not pacing, not hurried. Just standing there, staring down at his phone, saying something into it. I couldn't hear his voice, couldn't see who he was talking to. But his face was different. Strained, focused, like someone receiving instructions. When he came back in, he smiled again. Too fast, too wide, and asked if I wanted dessert. The more it happened, the more I noticed. Every time the door opened, he flinched just a little. His eyes would jump up, scan whoever came in, then drop again. He never really stopped watching the door. His hands shook slightly every time he returned from a call, and he always rubbed his fingers together like he was trying to calm himself down. And whenever I asked about his work or his life, the answers changed. One moment, he said he worked for a tech company. The next, it was consulting. Then, freelance projects, but he couldn't explain what kind. When I asked what his day-to-day looked like, he stuttered for a moment and then said something vague about meetings and data stuff. No company name. No titles. Just enough detail to sound real, but only if you weren't really listening. And I was listening. At one point, while he was making yet another call, He left his phone on the table. It lit up with a notification, a preview of a message or maybe an image. I couldn't tell. But I caught a glimpse of a photo. A house. A run-down, crumbling structure with boarded-up windows and a dead tree leaning sideways in the yard. The light in the photo looked all wrong, like it had been taken during a storm or under a dying sun. It looked abandoned. I asked him about it casually when he came back. He glanced at the phone, then at me, and forced a smile. "Just an old memory," he said, then changed the subject. By the time we got the check, I wasn't just unsettled. I was spooked. It wasn't anything obvious. No shouting, no aggression, but there was a strangeness in the silences, in the timing, in the way he always seemed to be slipping out of the moment and into something else, something secret. I paid my half and we stood to leave. He said he'd walk me to my car, and I let him, though I kept one hand on my keys the whole time. We said goodnight with a polite smile and a wave. No hug, no mention of a second date. He walked away quickly, vanishing around the corner like he had somewhere urgent to be again. When I got home, I started searching. First the dating app. His profile was gone. Just gone. No trace. I searched his first name and the vague job titles he'd mentioned. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No Instagram. No Facebook. I even reverse searched the house from the photo, guessing based on landmarks he'd casually mentioned. Nothing came up. Not even a close match. It was like he didn't exist. And that's what's been eating at me since. Because maybe he didn't. I didn't hear from him again. No texts, no emails, just silence. I told a few friends about it, but the story sounds too weird to worry about. And maybe nothing bad ever happened. Maybe he was just a private person. Maybe he was in witness protection. Maybe he was just strange. But I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to see those parts of him. That I wasn't supposed to notice how long he disappeared or how scared he looked when the phone rang. That I saw something, heard something, that wasn't meant for me. And now I'm part of a story I don't understand. Every so often, my phone buzzes at night, and I wonder, just for a second, if it's him, or someone who knows him. And when I walk into a diner or down a quiet street, I glance over my shoulder just to be sure he's not there. Because for all I know, he never really left. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out this small silver flash drive. She smiled, like it was some kind of inside joke. "A little surprise," she said, sliding it across the table. "A keepsake from tonight." I blinked. "What is it?" "Just something I thought you'd want to have. Something to remember this by." I didn't know how to react. It was strange. Not a cute card or a joke gift, but a USB stick. I laughed a little, but there was no real humor behind it. She just winked and said, "Open it when you get home," like this was totally normal. I didn't open it right away. Honestly, I sat there in my apartment for a while debating whether I should even plug it in. Curiosity got the better of me. Maybe it was some kind of quirky slideshow she'd made in advance. Maybe it was a playlist. Maybe she'd done something creative and weird, and it would all make sense. But the second I opened the folder, I knew something was very wrong. There were videos, dozens of them. Timestamps that matched the night. Titles like Outside Cafe, Table Cam, Laugh_3, Leaving_car view. The first file I opened was a video of me, sitting at our table, laughing, talking, completely unaware. The camera was angled perfectly, low, discreet. It was taken from across the table, maybe from her purse or a button cam. It caught everything. The little ways I moved, how I smiled, how I tapped the side of my cup when I was thinking. I clicked through the other files in rising panic. Another video showed me getting up to go to the bathroom. One was of me walking out of the cafe, crossing the street toward my car. The most chilling one was from behind me. Like someone had followed me and was filming me walking, completely unaware. I sat frozen in my chair, bile rising in my throat. These weren't silly keepsakes. This wasn't some cute romantic gesture. This was surveillance. Cold, calculated, detailed surveillance. She'd been filming me the entire night. Not with consent. Not with a single word of warning. And it wasn't just a camera sitting on the table. She had multiple angles. Different devices. Some of the footage was so smoothly done it felt like it came from someone who'd done this before. The recordings weren't just about the date. They were about me. The way I moved, the expressions I made, the things I said. Every detail, every moment, cataloged. Like I wasn't a person, but a subject. Something she could watch again and again. A collection piece. I tried texting her. Once, then twice. No reply. No read receipts. Then suddenly, her number stopped working. I checked the dating app, but her profile was gone. Like she'd never existed. Like I'd hallucinated the whole thing, except I had the proof sitting right in front of me on my laptop screen. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? That someone recorded me without permission on a date? That they gave me the proof and then disappeared? I don't even know her real last name. It's been weeks, and I still haven't deleted the flash drive. It's sitting on my desk, untouched. Every time I see it, I feel that cold, creeping fear rise up again. It's not just what she did. It's the fact that I didn't see it coming. That I thought I was having fun. That I thought something real was happening while someone was recording me like a subject in an experiment. And I can't stop wondering, was I the first, or just the latest? I never thought something like this would happen to me. I mean, you hear the stories, read them in articles, catch them in passing conversations, maybe even scroll past them online. But you never really think you'll be that person. You think, nah, that won't be me. I'm careful. I trust my gut. I'd know if something felt off. But I didn't. I didn't know. Not until it was too late. It happened on a date with a guy named Jack. We met through one of those dating apps. Nothing shady, just the usual small talk, some exchanged memes, the occasional voice note. He seemed nice. Funny. Kind of charming in a self-deprecating way. We decided to meet at this little neighborhood bistro. The kind of place with dim lighting and flickering candles on the tables, soft jazz playing low enough you could have an actual conversation without yelling over it. I'd been there a couple times before. It felt familiar. Safe. When Jack showed up, he looked just like his pictures. Better, even. He had this slightly messy hair that worked for him and this warm, open smile. We started talking, and I felt myself relax. He asked good questions, listened without interrupting. He made me laugh a few times, nothing forced. We ordered dinner. Something light, something safe. I went with a glass of red wine. He ordered a cocktail, then offered to get the second round for both of us later. Polite, attentive. The kind of date you walk away from thinking, maybe this is the start of something. But that night didn't end with a text about how nice it was to meet me. It didn't end with a second date or a polite goodbye. It twisted into something I still struggle to talk about. The first warning sign was so small I almost ignored it. My drink, the second one, tasted off. Not bad, just wrong. Like someone had added something bitter to it, just beneath the surface. But I didn't want to seem paranoid or rude, so I sipped it slower. Told myself it was a different kind of wine, or maybe the glass hadn't been rinsed well. I pushed the thought aside. Then came the dizziness. At first, it was subtle, like I'd stood up too fast or skipped a meal. My head felt light, floaty. But it wasn't the pleasant buzz you get from a good glass of wine. It was something else. Something darker. My vision started to blur around the edges, softening the outlines of everything. I blinked hard, trying to bring things back into focus, but it only made it worse. Jack kept talking, smiling, leaning in closer. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. That maybe I was tired. But then I saw it. His smile had changed. It wasn't warm anymore. It had this strange sharpness to it, a hint of satisfaction I didn't understand. His eyes weren't kind. They were watching, measuring, waiting. I remember setting my glass down carefully, my hands trembling so badly it made a soft clink against the table. That's when I knew something was really wrong. The glass wasn't empty, but I felt like I was about to pass out. There was a strange taste in my mouth, chemical, bitter, foreign. I tried to sit up straighter, to get my bearings, but my body didn't want to listen. It was like I was inside myself, but no longer in control. My heart started racing. My breath shortened. I could feel sweat on the back of my neck, and still, Jack kept talking. His words blurred into nonsense, muffled like they were coming from underwater. And his expression. I'll never forget that. He wasn't worried. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening. I looked around the restaurant, hoping someone, anyone, would notice something was off. But the servers were busy. Other diners were caught up in their own conversations. I tried to stand, but my legs didn't respond. I could barely move. My mouth opened to say something, but no sound came out. That's when the panic hit. Real, animal panic. The kind that overrides everything: shame, politeness, logic. My brain was screaming something is wrong, but my body was betraying me with every second that passed. Jack leaned in closer, his voice low and calm. I don't know what he said. I think he knew I couldn't understand anymore. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he just wanted to watch me fall apart in slow motion. I was trapped in a fading world, watching everything slip further and further out of reach. And the worst part, I was still aware, still conscious enough to know something terrible was happening, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next part is a blur. I don't remember leaving the restaurant. I don't remember who helped me, or how. Maybe a server saw something. Maybe I blacked out and someone called 911. All I know is I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile white lights and the dull ache of being alive. The doctors told me I was lucky, that whatever was in my system hadn't reached full effect, that someone must have intervened before things got worse. They said I'd been drugged. Likely something slipped into my drink while I was in the bathroom between courses. The police took a report. I gave them Jack's name, or what I thought was his name. The profile was gone by the next morning. No trace. Like he never existed. Just another ghost with a fake smile and a disappearing act. That night changed me. It made me question everything. My instincts, my safety, the way I move through the world. I still go on dates, but I watch every glass poured. I never leave anything unattended. I trust less. I flinch more. And every time I see someone smile just a little too easily, I wonder what might be hiding underneath. Because sometimes the scariest monsters don't lurk in the shadows. They sit across from you at dinner, tell you jokes, and ask about your favorite movie. Sometimes the worst nightmares don't start with a scream. They start with a smile and a drink you didn't know was poisoned. I thought I was just meeting someone new for a casual hangout, nothing sketchy, just a date with this girl named Polly. She picked the spot, an old, almost forgotten parking lot on the edge of town. No restaurants, no coffee shops, just cracked asphalt and a few flickering streetlights. When I asked why there, she said it was private and special, which I shrugged off at first, thinking maybe she just hated crowded places or something. But the second I pulled up and stepped out of my car, the vibe hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't normal. The parking lot was basically empty except for a few abandoned cars, that looked like they'd been sitting there forever. The streetlights buzzed and cast these weird shadows, long and twitchy. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. No birds, no distant traffic, nothing but silence stretched way too thin. I scanned around, half expecting someone else to show up, but it was just Polly and me. The air was sticky, the sky turning an ugly shade of purple with dusk creeping in fast. Polly seemed totally fine with it though. Calm like this was where she wanted to be. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes, which were flicking around like she was watching more than just me. We started walking through the lot toward a small patch of overgrown grass at the back, like some forgotten park squeezed between crumbling buildings. She said it was where she came to think, a hidden gem, but all I saw was a busted-up bench and some broken glass scattered on the ground. There was something off about the way she moved too. Not nervous, not excited, more like she belonged there, like the place was hers. I tried to joke around, to cut through the weirdness, but her laughs were quick and clipped, like she was waiting for something. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from a friend checking in, and I realized how isolated we were. No bars, no streetlights beyond the few flickering ones in the lot, and no way I could just get up and leave without making it obvious. We sat on that bench for a while, and Polly pulled out this old Polaroid camera, saying she liked capturing moments in real time. I didn't think much of it until she took a picture of me, but instead of showing it to me, she tucked it away like it was some kind of secret. I looked around again, trying to find something familiar, but the buildings around us were empty, like they'd been boarded up for years. I tried to ignore the creeping sense that we weren't just alone, but trapped. So, I met this guy Greg online, and after a couple days of chatting, we finally set up a date. I was already a little nervous because meeting someone new always comes with its own weird vibes, but I was actually kind of excited. The plan was simple. Dinner at this quiet little spot he picked out. But as soon as I got there, things started to get weird. Greg asked me to leave my phone behind. Not just once or twice, but right at the door or in the car. Said something about wanting us to be present, no distractions or anything. I remember thinking it was a little controlling, but I shrugged it off. I mean, maybe he just wanted to have a real conversation without phones in the mix, right? So, I left it by the door and walked inside, suddenly realizing I was cut off from everything I usually lean on for safety. No quick text to friends. No Google to check anything weird about him. No calling an Uber if I felt like leaving early. Just me and him. The place was dimly lit, kind of fancy, but empty except for a few other couples. Greg was charming at first, funny, easy to talk to. But I couldn't shake this tiny voice in the back of my head telling me I didn't have any backup. Every time I wanted to pull out my phone, I caught myself and remember I'd left it behind. It wasn't just inconvenient, it felt like I'd given away a layer of control I never wanted to lose. We sat at the table, and he started asking me all these questions, the kind that feel personal even if they're normal stuff. What I liked, who I hung out with, where I lived. It wasn't aggressive, but there was something in the way he asked that made me pause every time. Like he was collecting pieces of me, even if he was smiling. I tried to laugh it off, but every time he glanced at me, his eyes seemed too sharp, like he was looking for something beneath the surface. The food came, but honestly, I barely tasted it. I kept thinking about my phone, about how easy it usually was to call for help or just zone out if a date got weird. Without it, I was stuck in this bubble with Greg, and the walls of that restaurant felt closer than I wanted them to. I wanted to check the time or even just pretend to text a friend, but I couldn't. I was completely isolated. After a while, he suggested we take a walk. That's when the unease turned into something heavier. We left the restaurant and walked through these narrow, mostly empty streets with streetlights that flickered in patches. I started paying more attention to the little details, The way his hand lingered on my back a second too long. The way he would glance at the shadows around us, like he expected something to be there. I asked if I could get my phone from the car, just to check the time or message my friend to say where I was, but he said no. Said something about not wanting to break the mood, to keep the night special and distraction-free. I tried to hide how much that bothered me, but it was impossible. Without my phone, I felt trapped. Not physically, but mentally, like I was stuck in a game where I didn't know the rules. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard a single notification or beep from anyone reaching out to me. I started to panic a little inside, not because Greg was doing anything yet, but because I had no way of reaching out if I needed to. We passed a few closed shops, their windows dark and empty, and it felt like the whole neighborhood had been forgotten. The silence around us was thick, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone watching or waiting. Greg kept talking, but his voice felt distant, like I was underwater. I was hyper-aware of everything else. How my heart was racing, how my hands were clammy, how I was hoping for anything that could break the spell of isolation. I tried to think of excuses to leave, but without my phone, even figuring out a way back to my car felt impossible. I didn't even know how far we had walked or how long ago I'd dropped off my phone. When we finally stopped by a bench in a tiny park, Greg sat close. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. His smile was different, a little too eager, like he was waiting for me to relax and lower my guard completely. I wanted to tell him I needed my phone, that I wanted to go, but I felt frozen. Maybe it was the quiet, the lack of distractions, or maybe it was just how trapped I felt without my lifeline. The night stretched on, and I kept replaying every second in my head, thinking about how I let myself get talked into leaving my phone behind. It was like handing over my freedom, and suddenly, the guy who seemed cool and chill was someone I didn't really know at all. The whole time, I kept wondering what would have happened if I had said no, if I'd insisted on keeping my phone with me. Eventually, we walked back to where my car was parked. I grabbed my phone like it was a lifebuoy, relief flooding me the second I saw it. Greg's smile never faded, but I noticed how his eyes were a little darker, like he knew he still had the upper hand. I didn't say anything, just got in my car and started it up, feeling like I was escaping a trap I'd walked right into. Looking back, it wasn't just about leaving my phone behind. It was about realizing how easy it was to feel safe until someone slowly takes away your options. That night wasn't full of dramatic threats or wild scares, but it was a reminder that sometimes the scariest part is how quickly you can lose control, and how something as simple as being present can turn into the most dangerous trap of all. So, I thought I was just going on a normal date with this girl named Candace. We'd met through some mutual friends online, and honestly, she seemed cool at first. Smart, funny, and she picked this little Italian place downtown for dinner. I wasn't expecting much, just a chill night out to get to know someone new. But from the moment we sat down, something about the vibe felt off. Like the kind of off that doesn't hit you right away, but crawls under your skin slowly. The restaurant was busy, the kind of place with low lighting and clinking glasses everywhere. Candace ordered this fancy wine and kept glancing around like she was waiting for something, or maybe someone. I brushed it off, thinking she was just nervous or maybe had some weird quirk. Then the waiter brought the drinks, and Candace suddenly said we had to do a toast. No big deal, right? Except it wasn't just a casual cheers thing. She looked me dead in the eye, holding her glass up like she was about to drop something serious. Her smile was tight, not the easy kind people usually flash on first dates. Then she said it. Something like, "Here's to never letting you go," or "to the beginning of our forever." At first, I thought it was a cheesy pickup line or some joke. But her tone didn't match any joke I'd ever heard. It was flat, almost rehearsed, like she'd said it 1,000 times before, but meant it more like a promise, or a warning. That moment kind of stuck with me the whole night. I couldn't stop looking at her, trying to figure out what was behind that smile. She kept staring back, like she was testing me or daring me to react. I wanted to laugh it off, but instead, I just swallowed and took a sip of my wine. As dinner went on, Candace's vibe didn't lighten up. If anything, it got more intense. She asked questions that felt less like getting to know me and more like gathering information, where I lived, who I hung out with, my routine. Nothing about the conversation felt casual, and I caught her watching me way too closely, like she was studying my every move. The place started to feel smaller, more like a stage for whatever this was. Around us, couples were chatting and laughing, but we were in this bubble that felt way too tight. Every time I thought about leaving or changing the subject, Candace would steer the talk back to those same questions. The whole thing was like being trapped in a loop, only the loop was made of her intense stare, and that weird toast echoing in my head. Then came the moments where she got this dead serious look. Not angry, not sad, just this blank, fixed expression that made my stomach twist. It was like she was waiting for me to say something she already knew, or to admit I was hers in some way. It wasn't just unsettling. It was like stepping into a place I didn't want to be, but I didn't know how to get out. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird first date thing. Maybe she had a strange sense of humor or some personal drama. But then she started dropping little lines here and there, things that sounded sweet on the surface but made me feel like I was being warned. Like when she said, "We don't get many second chances," or "People don't walk away from what's meant to be." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and smiled, but inside I was freaking out. After dinner, she suggested we go for a walk. I figured fresh air might lighten the mood or at least get me away from the weird restaurant vibe. But as we walked through the quiet streets, her hands kept brushing against mine, not accidental, but not gentle either, like she was marking territory without saying it outright. Every time I looked at her, her eyes were darker, like she was holding back something, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. The park we ended up at was almost deserted, just a few streetlights flickering and some distant sounds of cars. Candace stopped by this old wooden bench and sat down, patting the spot next to her like she wanted me close. The way she smiled then, it wasn't friendly or flirty. It was something else. I swear I could feel her eyes drilling into me, like she was trying to see into my head. At that moment, the toast from dinner hit me again. Never letting you go. It wasn't just words. It was a promise she was ready to keep no matter what. The more I looked at her, the more it felt like she wasn't just interested in me as a person, but like she was planning something bigger, something that didn't involve me saying no. I don't remember exactly how we left the park, but I know I was trying to stay calm, playing it cool even though my brain was screaming to run. When I got back to my car, I grabbed my keys like they were a lifeline. Candace smiled that same tight smile and said something about this being the start, but I didn't stick around to hear more. Driving away, I kept thinking about how quickly a simple dinner turned into something else entirely. How a toast that sounded sweet at first could suddenly feel like a threat. It's crazy how one moment can shift the whole night, how someone you just met can make you realize how easily things can slip into something disturbing without warning. I still don't know what her plan was, or if she meant any of it seriously, but that night stuck with me. The way she looked at me like I was already hers, the way she talked like I didn't have a choice. It wasn't just a weird first date. It was a warning I didn't want to hear, but couldn't forget. I still can't believe how quickly a normal night out turned into something that left me feeling totally trapped. It wasn't dramatic or loud or dangerous in the way you'd expect. There were no flashing red lights or screaming alarms, just this slow, creeping realization that something wasn't right. And by the time I figured it out, the damage was already done. It started so small, so subtle, that it almost didn't register until it was too late. I met this guy, Ollie, through one of those dating apps. Nothing sketchy, just your typical banter, jokes about how awful dating is, the usual dance of sarcasm and oversharing. He seemed normal enough, not overly charming, not suspiciously vague. He had a real job, liked dogs, and didn't use weird filters in his profile pictures. After a few days of chatting, we agreed to meet at this little diner tucked away in the quieter part of town. Not trendy, not fancy, just the kind of place where you could actually hear the person across from you without shouting over a crowd or dodging neon cocktail lights. I got there a few minutes early, and Ollie showed up right on time. He looked just like his pictures, tallish, scruffy in that curated, I don't try too hard way, with an easy smile and a casual hoodie jacket combo. We shook hands, found a booth in the corner, and ordered burgers and fries, laughing about how neither of us wanted to pretend we were too cool to eat real food. The first hour or so was fine. We talked about music and movies, swapped embarrassing childhood stories, and joked about the weirdest messages we each received on dating apps. He was funny, not too intense, and didn't make me feel like I had to perform. It was going well enough that I started to relax, even take off my coat, which I hung on the back of my chair. Ollie took his off too and did the same. It was warm inside, cozy, normal. But things started to shift near the end of the meal, in a way that I didn't fully register until much later. The change was quiet, so quiet it could have slipped by unnoticed if I hadn't been paying just a little more attention. We finished eating, and the conversation slowed. Nothing awkward, just that natural fade when the food's gone and the check hasn't arrived yet. I reached behind me to grab my coat, ready to head out, but it wasn't there. I blinked, confused. I glanced around the booth, under the table, then back at Ollie. And that's when I saw it, my coat, draped over his arm like it belonged to him. He was holding it so casually, like he didn't even realize what he was doing. I assumed it was a simple mistake. We'd both taken off our coats around the same time, and maybe in the shuffle, he grabbed mine by accident. So I smiled and said, "Hey, that's actually my coat." That's when it got weird. Instead of laughing it off or handing it over, Ollie hesitated. His smile faltered, not fully gone, just rearranged. He gave this little half-laugh and said something vague like, "Oh, really? I thought yours was over by the counter," which made no sense because I'd never been near the counter. Then he backpedaled, adding, "Maybe the staff moved it." Like the diner employees had randomly taken my coat and replaced it with his. It was such a weak excuse, I didn't even know how to respond at first. I reached out a little, expecting him to just hand it back, but he didn't. He tightened his grip, subtle but noticeable. I sat there, frozen for a beat, not sure if I should push or laugh it off. The tension was so small, so carefully disguised, that I almost convinced myself it was just a misunderstanding. But then he changed the subject. Just like that. Pivoted to something unrelated, something about a movie he'd watched recently. He didn't look nervous. He looked amused. Like this was part of the night for him. Like the silence I was sitting in, the confusion running wild through my head, was the most interesting part of the evening. That's when the unease really set in. The diner was still mostly empty, and I could hear the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights and the clinking of silverware. But everything suddenly felt off balance, like the floor had tilted beneath me and no one else noticed. I kept trying to brush it off. Maybe he's awkward, maybe it's just a social miscue, something explainable. But the longer he held my coat, the more it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a test. Was he seeing how I'd react? Was he trying to provoke me, control the situation? I didn't know. But the coat had become more than just something to keep me warm. It had become a symbol. A quiet power move. A reminder that, somehow, without me even realizing it, Ollie had taken something that was mine and decided not to give it back. I checked my pockets under the table. Phone, wallet, keys, all still there. But I didn't feel safe. I felt exposed. Like if he could pull something so small and make it feel so big, what else could he do? What was the point of this? Was he trying to make me uncomfortable? Humiliate me? Or was it something more subtle, something darker? I tried to keep my voice calm. I said, "Seriously, I need my coat." I didn't joke. I didn't smile. I looked him in the eye. And for a second, just a second, his expression dropped. No smirk. No charm. Just something flat. Blank. And then, without saying a word, he tossed the coat across the booth like it didn't matter at all. Like it hadn't just been the centerpiece of this invisible, twisted little standoff. I put it on quickly. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let him see. We settled the check, barely spoke. The conversation was gone, drained of anything real. The walk to the door felt like a hallway in a dream. Too long, too quiet, every sound exaggerated. I said goodbye, not because I meant it, but because I needed it to end. The drive home was silent, except for my mind, which wouldn't shut up. I kept replaying the moment he held my coat like it was nothing, the way his eyes stayed on me, just waiting. The whole thing seemed so small from the outside, but to me, it was massive. A crack in the floor where something darker had slipped through. I don't know what Ollie's deal was, or what he was hoping to get out of that night. Maybe he did it for fun. Maybe it was a habit. Or maybe it was just a way of seeing how far someone would bend before they broke. But I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to that diner, and I'm never letting someone like that into my space again. That night taught me how power doesn't always come with raised voices or slamming doors. Sometimes it comes wrapped in politeness, hidden in smiles. And sometimes, all it takes to unravel your sense of safety is a stolen coat and a man who won't let go. Alright, so here's the thing. I went on this date with a girl named Harley, and honestly, I never thought it would turn into something straight out of a creepy movie. I mean, first dates can be awkward, weird, even a little uncomfortable sometimes, but this one, it was something else. It started normal enough. Met at this little artsy cafe that was kind of quiet, dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and weird paintings on the walls. The kind of place where you think you might actually have a decent conversation without some loud background noise. So I'm sitting there, sipping on my coffee, and Harley shows up, looking chill and confident. We start talking, and I'm thinking, okay, this might go somewhere. We talk about all the usual stuff: music, movies, what we do for work, dumb stories from college. She's interesting, funny, keeps the conversation flowing without it feeling forced. Then, out of nowhere, she gets up and says she needs to step outside for a minute. She leaves the cafe, and I'm just sitting there, thinking she's probably grabbing a cigarette or something. It's just a minute, no big deal. But then I notice something weird happening. When she comes back, it's like she's a completely different person. I don't mean like a sudden mood change or anything subtle. I mean she's literally wearing different clothes, her hair styled totally different. Gone was the casual loose hair from before, replaced by tight curls, and some kind of bold color that I swear wasn't there a moment ago. Her whole vibe changed. It was like she'd stepped out of one person and slid right into someone else's skin. I blinked, confused, wondering if I was just tired or if it was some kind of prank. But no, she sat back down like nothing happened. I tried to ask what was going on, but she just gave me this weird smile and said something like, "You didn't really know the real me before." It wasn't a joke or playful. It was almost like a challenge, like she was daring me to keep watching and guessing who she was next. From that moment, the whole date shifted into this strange performance where I was the audience, and she was the star switching between characters. It wasn't just the clothes or hair changes either. Sometimes she'd suddenly have a completely different way of talking, like she was slipping into someone else's personality. One minute, she was all bubbly and energetic, and the next she was cold, distant, even a little creepy in how she looked at me. I kept waiting for some explanation or a sign she'd stop playing this game, but it never came. Each time she got up to go to the bathroom or make a call, she came back looking different, like she was trying on new versions of herself right in front of me. At first, I thought maybe she was trying to keep things exciting, or maybe she was into some kind of cosplay or theater stuff I didn't know about. But the way she said it, like I was only just now getting a glimpse of the real her, made it clear this wasn't just a quirky habit. It felt more like she was hiding something, or worse, that she was testing me. Like she wanted to see if I could handle all these versions of her, or if I'd crack and run away. The whole night became exhausting because I wasn't even sure who I was actually spending time with anymore. Was any of it real? Was there a real Harley at all? Or was this just some twisted game where she got to control everything, and I had to sit there, confused and trying to piece together a person who kept changing by the minute? I didn't know if I should laugh it off, freak out, or just get up and leave. And here's the thing. It wasn't just about the looks or the way she talked. Sometimes, the way she looked at me changed completely. One moment it was warm and inviting, the next it was sharp, like she was studying me like a puzzle she wanted to solve or break apart. I caught her staring for longer than felt normal, and it gave me this sick feeling in my gut, like I was the one under a microscope. We were sitting in this cafe, but suddenly it felt like I was somewhere else. The normal hum of other customers and baristas became background noise to this strange, unsettling vibe between us. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe she just had some weird way of expressing herself, but deep down, I knew this was something darker. At one point, she vanished again and came back wearing this vintage leather jacket, dark lipstick, and smoky eyes that made her look almost unrecognizable. I was frozen, trying to process if I was still on a date or if I'd walked into some kind of twisted theater show. I wanted to ask her to stop, to be herself, but the words stuck in my throat. The way she said, "You didn't really know the real me before," echoed in my head, like a warning or a secret. After that, the rest of the night felt like a blur. I barely remember the ride home or even how I got there. The whole experience messed with me more than I thought it would. I kept thinking about all the different versions of Harley I saw that night and wondering if any of them were really who she was. It made me question what people hide when they're first meeting you and how much you can really trust what someone shows on a first date. I never heard from Harley again, and honestly, I'm relieved. But that night stuck with me. The feeling that I wasn't just on a date, but caught in some kind of twisted performance where I was supposed to play along. And if I didn't, who knows what might have happened next. The whole thing was like watching a shapeshifter trying on new faces, and me being stuck there, trying to find the real one beneath the masks. So yeah, that was my date with Harley. Definitely one for the books. I'm still not sure what was going on or what she wanted from me, but I know one thing for sure. Sometimes the person sitting across from you isn't the one you think, and sometimes that's way scarier than anything you could imagine.